It's India versus the West again. This time at the World Trade Organization, some 164 trade ministers are attending the latest summit. It is being held in Abu Dhabi. A lot of issues and topics are on the agenda. But we're focusing on two of them tonight. One is climate change policies and two, food subsidies. Both issues pitch India against the West. Let's look at the first one. India's Commerce Secretary has flagged a major issue at the World Trade Organization. Listen to New Delhi's statement here. India expressed serious concerns regarding the increasing use of trade protectionist unilateral measures which are sought to be justified in the guise of environmental protection. I know that sounds a bit technical, but here's what it means. Some countries are using climate change to justify trade barriers. For example, the European Union. They've passed something called the carbon tax. It will come into effect by 2026. And what does it do? It imposes import duties on carbon-intensive goods. Things like steel, cement and aluminium. These have a very large carbon footprint. So the EU says these imports will have to pay a tax. How much? Between 20 and 35%. The idea is to produce such carbon-heavy goods inside the EU. This way, Brussels can enforce pollution norms. Just two problems though. A, studies say it will do little to cut emissions. And B, it will be unfair to Asian producers. Just consider India. We export a lot of metal to Europe. In fact, around 26% of the total ends up in the EU. 26%. But imagine this carbon tax being imposed. Indian metal will now be 20 to 35% more expensive. So what will European factories do? They will abandon Indian metals. Instead, they will use cheaper European ones. Do you see why that's a problem? In practice, this tax is a trade barrier. It is giving an unfair advantage to European producers. But tell that to the EU. They say it's all about protecting the earth, about incentivizing Asian producers to go green. The United States has a similar policy. They are handing out tax cuts for electric vehicles. How much? Up to $7,500, which is around 6.2 lakh rupees. Now, this tax cut has just one condition. The EV you buy must have been made in North America. Basically the US or Canada. If it is made elsewhere, you won't get tax benefits. Again, this reeks of protectionism. It gives US-made cars an unfair advantage. But tell that to Joe Biden. He says he's building a better earth. Both India and China have criticized these policies. They want climate and trade to be separated, which brings us to the second flashpoint, and that is food security. WTO members cannot spend unlimited amount of money on food subsidies. There is an upper limit. 10% of the total production value. That's what you can spend. But developing countries tend to cross that limit. Again, let's look at India. New Delhi procures food grains from farmers at a fixed price. It's called the minimum support price, or the MSP. It's higher than the market price. The government then sells this grain to people who need it. Some 800 million Indians. And the selling cost is much, much lower. So to recap, India buys grain at high rates, then sells them at much lower rates. Our population needs that kind of support. This also means that India has a public stock of food grains. It's become a point of contention now. Developing nations say the stock is unnecessary. After all, food security is national security, but Western countries disagree. They say public stocks often distort the prices. It can affect the market price of food. You can expect this battle to dominate the WTO talks. It also says a lot about India's role at the World Trade Organization. We are the 5th largest economy in the world. We are growing faster than most major economies. So the West is asking, why does India need so many subsidies? The answer, we say, lies in the economic divide. Yes, India's GDP is bigger than most Western nations, but look at the per capita income. Do you see the gap here? It means Indians need more state support. The government is working to reform that support, but eliminating it is not ideal. We saw that during the farm laws of 2020, the government of India tried to reform the agriculture market. The response was massive protests. So India is trying to change a few things, but the West needs to understand that change takes time.